Welcome, everyone, to What Would You Change, a movie review podcast from the Super Monkey Fighters. I am Loki, here with Papa Nugget and Monkey Feathers. How's it going?
Good.
Hello.
We're going back to The Breakfast Club. It was a movie made in the 80s, so it was directed and written by John Hughes. This one stars Emilio Estevez, Paul Gleason, Michael Anthony Hall, John Kapelos, Judd Nelson, Molly Ringwald, Ali Sheedy. The blurb on IMDb about what this film is about is 5 high school students meet in Saturday detention and discover they have a lot more in common than they thought.
Can we just start with why is it called The Breakfast Club?
Is it called The Breakfast Club?
Yeah, because okay.
They don't eat breakfast.
This is the first time I ever watched this.
It's something I've always seen.
That's what I was trying to figure out for the entire movie. And then they never explain it.
The film's title comes from the nickname invented by students and staff for detention at New Trier High School, the school attended by the son of one of John Hughes's friends. Thus, those who were sent to detention were designated members of the Breakfast Club. Seems like that would have been a very easy thing to explain in the movie.
So I think there's one thing I think I know what I would change.
I agree with that fully. Although I do love that origin story of why is it called The Breakfast Club? Well, because one of the kids' friends of John Hughes's neighbor's cousin, it's one of those kind of
It's like the girl in Ferris Bueller, right? Yeah. My friends, uncles, cousins, dogs, brothers, sons, mothers.
Yeah. So mystery solved. Thanks, Google. But that's one of those things I have always thought my entire life is why is it called The Breakfast Club? I should say my entire life. I was probably a teenager when I first saw this. So outside of that, what would you like? So before we jump right into the negatives, I'll say this, I do like the characters.
I like where they were going with the characters, what they were intending them to be.
So I do like that. I do like. I think it's acted fairly well. And I know it's one thing that's been made fun of quite a bit in pop culture. And you'll understand if you've seen the movie. But one of the things I do actually really like the most is how the principal, dean of students, whatever his name is, like can't.
He's
point,
the assistant principal.
It's always like 4 or 5 finger like. And there is the reference to, if you mess with the bull, you get the horns. But every time he's pointing, it's like multiple fingers out there. And so I think that lends to the jerk teacher motif that the character that he's playing like that. That's very reminiscent of the teachers I hated in high school. Like they were, he could have been a teacher that I had in high school. In fact, he probably watched that and thought, I'm going to be that guy. That's how you put kids in line. I also like the fact that the fictional world of Shermer, Illinois, which is where all of John Hughes movies are set. But the school, that seems like what I wanted high school to be. Like, and then my high school was never, like, the building itself, like, wasn't.
That was a huge library.
A huge school with a big library that has, like, interesting things in it. And there's multiple levels and all that kind of stuff. And, it was one of those things I always wanted more out of those kinds of things. And I just never had
No one knew if you smoked marijuana in the library.
It was big enough that the smell didn't carry.
You could hotbox one of the other rooms, and
they had the foreign language room. You could hotbox that.
Totally believable.
Great for dance montages. Again, John Hughes.
I'm going to say this is a like, but it probably wasn't meant to be a like. But Emilio Estevez is, what was his character? Andrew Clark, the athlete, the wrestler. When your parents explained to you what the Reefer Madness was, he just acted out what Reefer Madness was.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was supposed to be a dance montage or just Reefer Madness, but I liked it.
I think the public perception has changed from 1985 to now as to the effects of marijuana. But I even think back then, like, was that really what people thought of? Like, when he goes to get it, all the kids are like, "Oh my gosh, that's oh!" And then when they go to smoke it, they're all like, "You gotta get, like let's go." And it's like, you all have clearly smoked pot before. You're just trying to portray this image that you haven't. So yeah, that was, to me, that whole segment's a weird diversion from a more serious aspects of the story.
But I think that kind of, and this is something that I would say I thought the pacing was good on, is how they start the beginning when they all arrive, and they clearly don't, they're not friends by any means. They may kind of know who each other are. So it sets the stage kind of with kind of just that general awkwardness on how their interactions are going. They're clearly themselves interacting within this kind of strange group that they've been thrusted into.
Well, and yet that opening scene really establishes their archetypes very well.
Yeah.
Where
their archetypes and the type of parents that each of them has.
Yeah.
And the expectations that the parents are putting on their children.
One thing I will also point out, Shermer, Illinois is apparently the richest place in the world. Every car in that was relatively new or fairly fancy. I mean, even Ali Sheedy's character, it's a Cadillac. She's getting dropped off in a Cadillac. So and then one of them was a fairly new Ford Bronco. People there are they're doing all right in life. So, which is strange because socioeconomic differences is kind of a point in this film as well. I was like, it seems to me like everybody's doing okay. Nobody's pulling up in a 50s, busted up car. So, but yeah, I think that's a fantastic opening as well, is when they're all getting dropped off. And
kind of going back to what I was saying is kind of they're all going to go smoke weed. Like it went from that to they're still awkward around each other, but they're starting to like open up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
They're starting
it breaks down the walls. So
they're starting to take those chances, and then of course when they all get high, then they're all best buds after that.
Well, and watching, because it's really three of them interacting. I hit a point where I thought, it was like, this is weird because Emilio Estevez did go off with them, but he's not there in the scene when the three of them are sitting around.
Yeah.
But then they explain, like, as soon as I had that thought, he busts out of the foreign language lab and does his little flash dance moment or his footloose moment, and away he goes. So
what I liked about this movie is I liked the characters. And I liked that even though that they were stereotypical, like the prom queen and the jock and the loner and the nerdy kid and things like that, the stories behind these characters I felt was very realistic, because these are students who feel the pressures of who they are and who their parents want them to be. Because you have the nerdy kid who he can't fail. He's not allowed to fail. Even his mom in the beginning says, well, you can't let this happen again, and you need to be studying while you're in your detention and things like that. And it explains the reason why he was in detention was because he brought a flare gun to kill himself. And while he didn't go through with it, it's still the expectations. The jock, where the mentality that, oh man, everyone fools around, so it's fine, but just don't let it happen again. It's the society and what it effectively puts onto these students and who they're meant to, who and what society expects them to be and who they themselves want to be. Because I think that the whole scene where they're talking about their lives and their lives with their families, it's very realistic for me in watching it, because these people are crying and they're emotional about sharing their stories, and it's realistic in just society and how you can't, if you fit into a certain archetype, you can't necessarily break out of it. Because they even mentioned that once Monday rolls around, they're likely not to talk to each other because they're stuck in their cliques. They're stuck being popular or nerdy or loner or whatever. And they can't break out of it because society says that you can't.
And for me, that's one of the things that's always been tough with this movie, is I've never really clicked with any characters. I've ever identified with any of them. Because if I try to put myself in that situation, if I was in that detention with those kids and they all it started spouting off or doing whatever, I'd be like, all right, losers, see you later. I'm taking a nap. Like, I don't identify with any of them. And it just seems far fetched to me. And maybe I'm too cool for school kind of attitude. But like they try and make John Bender, his character, played by Judd Nelson, the burnout who doesn't care about anything. But he seems to be the one driving everything, and he's the one building all the interactions, and he's the one forcing all of these emotions. Like, he seems to care quite a bit. And that's where I've always, like, no, having been a kid in high school who didn't care about high school and didn't care about the cliques and the clubs and all those kinds of things, like, you just go away from it, and you're not part of it. So it's always been, that's always been a struggle for me, but I do like the characters in those archetypes, and I can see how growing up, I had friends who fit those kinds of roles. I had, the friend who was, had to be in football because it was what his dad wanted him to do and couldn't get, a B was a bad grade. And I'm like, hey, it's not a fail. D-. Yes, I don't have to take this class again, kind of a thing. So,
yeah, and I would agree with some of the things that you said. And I myself, I don't feel like I fall into any of the archetypes either, but like you mentioned, I can see that those archetypes in other people that I've known, and we deal kind of with archetypes today. But I think that's what they were trying to kind of show in that main scene, right? Is the breaking down of those archetypes and how they are the same. But I also believe that they didn't go far enough. They just kind of left it with, well, sorry, that's you're in your role. Monday's going to roll around, and that's just how it is. That's just how life is. But
the thing about
like they didn't really nail that home as to, is that how it's going to be or is it not? Like, they talked about it.
They didn't go anywhere.
They kind of still had some more growth, but yeah, they didn't really, they didn't really make a resolute,
That's the thing about these movies, is that they're taking place within a day in the life of a high school student. And it's not like it was meant to just say, oh, here's a week and here's here's Friday and this is what happened to these students to get them in detention, and here's Saturday and the aftermath of the detention, and here's Monday and what has happened. So I know that ambiguous might not be a good thing, but at the end of the day, I look at it as it's just supposed to be a day in the life of a high school student. And you can leave it up to however you want it to end. But ideally, I look at it more at face value as they may or may not go back to their normal cliques, or they may decide to actually change. And I guess it's the analogy of, is the glass half empty or half full? And however you want to look at it.
I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing that they did leave it open-ended like that. Actually, I am saying that. And I think that's going to go into one of the probably my dislikes about this movie is, even though it's all about breaking down kind of those walls between people, these high school kids, how different they are, but how similar at the same time they are.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it really went anywhere. Like, at the end of the day, we're just back to the beginning, right? They just all get in their cars and they leave. I feel like I just maybe walked in a circle. And it kind of feels a little boring to me. Like, sure, there was the journey, but I don't feel like it went anywhere.
They do kind of all get off in their cars, but the getting into the cars there's some contrast with when they arrive, right? They all arrive separately and individually. You're introduced to them individually, and some of them leave together. Other than the nerdy kid, unfortunately, sorry, you
don't get paired off.
Yeah, nerds don't get love, so. But
you don't get nerdy love.
They do kind of show that relationship thing, which I put in those kinds of things into a big negative because they were weird, and the ending scenes are weird, where like the two couples, to say that they coupled out, like those are just weird goodbyes for, hey, we've been friends for like a day, and it's like,
Yeah.
and their parents are sitting there watching them like make out. But yeah, it would be nice to know, like, okay, really nail that home that yes, these kids have learned something. They are going to change. They are going to stay friends. They're not going to care what their other friends think of, and they're,
Well, and I
people are
think
going to realize, oh, right, this isn't that big of a deal.
if I were writing this, I would have probably pushed more that high school kids shouldn't feel like they're in these archetypes. Like they should feel like they're whoever they want to be. Like, and they should be free to be who they want to be. Like they don't have to fit into these roles, even if they feel like society or their parents are forcing them into these roles. And I think that's kind of where it misses for me.
Yeah, where the essay doesn't really drive home that no, we can do whatever we're going to do and we're going to make the change. It's more, it's stupid to make us write an essay about who we think we are when you only see us as the nerd, the jock, the whatever, right? It's not like an action plan going forward. It's just hey, this is, archetypes exist. Not, here's how we're going to break them down. We're going to be friends. We're going to change those kinds of things. Thinking through why they're all in detention, the nerdy kid, he's actually friends with the kid who's the reason why Emilio Estevez is there. And Emilio Estevez, when he finally opens up about it, the story that he tells is he starts joking out like he taped this kid's butt cheeks together or something like that. And then when they pulled the tape off, it took a bunch of hair because he was a hairy kid and some skin. But when he gets into the story, what really happened is he was sitting in gym class in the locker room, thinking about how his dad is upset at him for not goofing around as a kid.
Yeah.
So he kind of snaps and beats the shit out of someone randomly, picks the smallest, skinniest guy in the room, beats the shit out of him, and then tapes him up. Like, hey, great, I don't fit into my archetype anymore, but you physically assaulted someone. Like, how do you go around being the nice friend? Like, you should probably be in jail. Like, you're kind of a psychopath. Like, this kid did nothing to prompt it. He would just happened to be in the smallest guy in the locker room, and just, that's a big deal that is just kind of glossed over as to.
I think there's a lot of big deals that are glossed over in each of their lives.
So, yeah. There's big high drama for those emotional scenes to get the angry teens invested. And yeah, I think the payoffs are a little bit weak. And maybe this is hindsight looking back at it, not being 16. But yeah, for me, one of the big interesting things, and it's kind of a mix, negative, positive. It's a positive because of the performance. I think Judd Nelson did an amazing job acting that part. But this is a 97-minute long movie, so call it a 90-page script. 80 pages of this has to be John Bender talking. Like, there's very little dialogue from anyone else other than Judd Nelson going off all the time about people. And then sometimes Emilio Estevez tries to kind of white knights the situation, and sometimes the principal teacher guy, has some scenes. Until that final, that moment where they all kind of come together and that big emotional, they all explain why they're there scene, which is, it's just a weird thing where it's just like, wow, this is really like, this is kind of a one-man show. It's not about this group very much. It's more about this one loudmouth who also, I'm going to just say it, has the ability to teleport, which is a big negative. So he gets removed from the group and locked in a closet and climbs out through the ceiling of the first floor and somehow falls out of the ceiling on the second floor. I do love that scene, though, when he's telling himself a joke as he's walking along. Like, he can't stop talking. Even when he's alone, he's still trying to be the clown. So I will say, though, the scene when John Bender's in the closet and the teacher's there with him, threatening him. I have actually had a very similar conversation with a teacher like that before in high school. That's the only moment that I think rang true for me, was that angry, pissed off guy who just shouldn't have been a teacher or should have stopped being a teacher a long time ago, who's really only out there to try and be a dick.
But he makes
So,
$40,000 a year.
it was
31.
Was it 30? I don't remember the number.
Which is
I remember the 30. I remember the 31 because he was so proud of it, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about that now in
here's the thing.
time frame of now. It's not a good amount to make, and
apparently nothing's really changed for teachers because most of the teachers I know make about that now. So,
yeah.
Again, evidence that Shermer, Illinois is a magical place where everything's better. So,
And that you can have a fancy house and a fancy car on $31,000 a year.
yes.
So the thing that kind of drove me a little crazy, and I don't know if it really matters at all, but the principal, like, he's there at the beginning, and he's all like trying to be a hard ass, like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear you. My office is just across the hall. And then, like, he comes in a couple times, and then he just disappears and starts drinking beer with the janitor in the basement. And then they're just like,
well,
doing whatever
he goes
they're
down there
doing.
to read through private records, confidential student records,
In which
Yeah.
he's not
To find
supposed to
dirt on
have
the kids, I
access
guess?
to, but he does have access to. But the
then also
janitor
nothing ever
knows
really-
he shouldn't have access to them.
and then gets $50 out of him, and then maybe because they don't even really resolve that, he's like, just give me $50, and then like the next time you see him, they're just drinking beer together and kind of having their own little life moment. Or the wise janitor's kind of giving him advice on how to not be a dick to kids.
I'm not because he's the assistant principal. I had to look this up because I didn't know if he was a principal or a teacher or what.
Again,
But
John Hughes doesn't have problems with teachers, has problems with administration.
yes. Granted, I know that there are people like this, but anytime I see movies with essentially teachers depicted this way, it gives a bad name to all the good teachers out there. And I've had a couple of teachers, not to the extent of this, but I've had a couple of teachers who abuse their power and they take it too far. And I didn't like the assistant principal because the whole part where he's trying to get into a fight with Bender, you're taking it too far. You are a complete asshole and you don't care. And you shouldn't be in this position of power. And I get that there are people out there who are in positions of power who do exactly that. But
And he
that
probably
is
volunteers
something-
for this detention duty because he loves it so
that's the thing.
much.
Yeah. He shows up on a Saturday. Like, that's the thing that's like, really, the vice principal's gonna show up on a Saturday? Like, no. That's one thing with him as well that I would have changed. Like, there's the scene where they've rigged the door so it won't stay open, and he's trying to put a chair in front of it. It's a double set of doors. Just open the other door. Like, maybe stage that scene a little bit differently so that there's not an obvious solution that everyone would see. Rig the one door to close.
No one's ever propped a door open.
Like, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's not a doorstop in the entire building.
It's funny because I have that as a complaint and that thing I would change, because I think it makes the vice principal or assistant principal more bumbling than he needs to be.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, the teacher that I had the conflict with, who I did have that scene rung true to me, because I've had the teacher threaten to fight me and try and get me to punch him. And he was also the guy who was dumb enough to not realize you should open a door. He's a teacher that when Segways were first announced, they were on Good Morning America. And he thought that they were mind control. Like, it wasn't that it was just a gyro and you leaned forward and went forward and back. He legitimately thought, and we all thought at one point in time that he was joking or trying to get us to believe that it was mind control. No, he legitimately thought that it was mind control.
Like, you control it with your mind.
Like, you think forward and it goes. You think backwards and it goes.
You mean it's not that? Wait,
yes.
what?
This teacher was one of the stupidest people I have ever met in my entire life. So I could see that being realistic, but in this movie, it would have been nice to see give the principal a little bit more competency level to where he understood that I'll open the door a little bit. Like, I'll figure out a different way of propping the door open and not just give up or
Well, they tried to put
in
that
the room with the kids. So,
well, they tried to put that like cabinet of brochures.
Yeah. They tried to put the cabinet of
Awkwardly.
brochures in there and awkwardly in there. And then,
Then he gave up.
it's just, to me, that's a bad scene. Just change it. Like, do similar kinds of things, but don't make it an obvious solution. Like, we got to figure out how to make this door not close. Or for some reason, I've got you in detention, but I'm not going to be in the room with you to make sure you're following my rules. I'm going to give you my rules and then leave to try and catch you. Like, just change that a little bit. Like, some other kind of a device where he gets pulled away for some reason. So I think I would have just, reworked some of those gags to be a little bit more realistic, and then reworked some of the logistics of the scenes. Like, it takes place in this library, but sometimes it's like it jumps around and you're not sure what's going on or where people are. And, when they're smoking weed and all of a sudden Emilio Estevez pops out of the library or
the fact that they're smoking weed at all and it's not even detected. That thing, the smell of weed lingers everywhere for days.
And the fact that they're just
smoking
cool doing
cigarettes
that
too.
for ripping books apart and doing all sorts of, like, they trash that place. It's also an interesting thing where it takes place in the day in a day, but to kind of show progression within the characters, or there's costume changes because they all show up heavily layered, wearing jackets and upon jackets, and then slowly, like, so it feels like it's more time than's actually taken place because they have costume changes throughout. Emilio Estevez starts with his leather jacket on and then has a blue hoodie and then is just in his, sleeveless shirt. Their clothing adapts over time as they, get more comfortable with each other. And so, I get that those are the kinds of things that people like and get back to, but I've never, Breakfast Club has never been one of those where I was like, oh yeah, this is fantastic. Like, it is what it is. And
I would not recommend this one.
Yeah.
No, not even just to watch.
Yeah. Monkey Feathers, what are your thoughts on recommendations?
Yes, I would recommend watching this movie. I like this movie and I like the characters that they've told. Is it the perfect movie in the world? No, it has some flaws, and I think that some things could have been written differently or added to and given more depth. But overall, I do think it's a movie that I like, and I've seen it several times now. So, yeah, I would recommend watching it.
Let us know below what you guys think of The Breakfast Club and the amazing decade of John Hughes films. Please don't tell us your own coming of age story. We just don't want to hear it in the comments. But tell us what you think of this. Tell us which one of us you agree with. Tell us
more
what your thoughts
specifically,
on
which
are.
half of us you agree with, because let's be honest, there's
also
very
tell us
specific.
your stories of smoking weed in the library during detention, because I know you have them. Anyway, this is dragging out way too long, so adios. We'll catch you in the next one.
See ya.